The chill outside had a bite to it, the kind that seeped through the layers of a jacket and made a person think longingly of warm places. The man stood on the sidewalk, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his breath making little clouds in the evening air. He was looking at a coffee shop window, all lit up and golden against the gray street. Inside, people were laughing, hunched over laptops, steam rising from their mugs. It looked like a slice of another, warmer world. He glanced down at the case in his hand. It was an old guitar case, scuffed at the corners, with a sticker from a long-defunct music festival peeling off one side. He wasn't old, this man, maybe in his late 20s, but life had etched a few careful lines around his eyes, the kind that come from thinking too much or worrying too hard. His clothes were clean but simple, a little thin for the weather. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just very, very tired, and the idea of being inside that warm glow, even for a few minutes, was a powerful pull. But he had no money. He'd counted the change in his pocket 3 times on the walk over. It was enough for a bus fare, maybe, but not for a coffee, not for entry into that warm world. He had his guitar, though. That was the one thing he always had. The idea came to him then, and it made his stomach tighten with a nervous flutter. It was a simple idea, a trade. Music for warmth. Taking a deep breath that did nothing to calm the fluttering, he pushed the door open. A wave of heat and the rich, bitter scent of coffee washed over him. The noise of grinding beans and clinking cups and quiet chatter filled his ears. For a second, he just stood there, feeling out of place, a cold spot in the cozy room. A few people glanced up from their screens or their conversations, their eyes sliding over him and his case before turning back to their own lives. He made his way to the counter. Behind it was a woman, probably the manager. She had her back to him, focused on wiping down a shiny espresso machine with a clean white cloth. She moved with an efficient, no-nonsense kind of energy. He waited, his throat feeling dried. She turned around, her expression politely neutral, ready to take an order. She saw the guitar case first, then his face. Her smile stayed professional, but her eyes became a little more guarded. She'd seen people with guitars before, people who wanted to hand out flyers or ask for donations. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice friendly but firm. This was it. The moment. His words felt sticky in his mouth. He cleared his throat softly. "Hi," he began, his voice quieter than he intended. He tried again. "I was wondering. I don't have any money for a coffee today." He said it plainly, no pity, just a fact. He saw her posture shift slightly, a gentle preparation to say no or direct him to leave. He hurried on. "But I play. I was wondering if I could play one song, right over there, in the corner, just one song. And for that, could I have a cup of coffee? Just a plain black coffee. That's all." He finished and held his breath. He kept his eyes on hers, trying to show her that he meant it, that this wasn't a scam or a trick. He was a musician, and this was what he had to offer. The manager didn't answer right away. She looked at him, really looked. She saw the wear on his jacket sleeves, the careful way he held his case, the earnest hope and deep embarrassment warring in his expression. She'd heard a lot of stories in this job, some true, some not. This felt different. It wasn't a grand tale of woe. It was a simple, awkward ask, a trade of skill for a basic comfort. She glanced around her shop. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. No big rush. The risk was low. If he was terrible, it was one song, and then he'd be gone. If he was a problem, she could handle it. But something in his quiet dignity stopped her from just shooing him away. She let out a small sigh, not of annoyance, but of decision. "Okay," she said, her voice softening just a touch from its earlier businesslike tone. "One song. Make it good. The corner by the window. Don't disturb the customers if they're working. And it's just a regular coffee." Black, relief, warm and sweet, flooded through him. It was immediately chased by a spike of pure fear. Now he had to deliver. He had to be good. "Thank you," he said, the words heartfelt. "Thank you so much. I won't be loud." He gave her a small, grateful nod and walked over to the corner she'd pointed to. It was a little alcove with a small, empty space of floor between 2 armchairs where no one was sitting. Perfect. He set his case down on the floor, the familiar clicks of the latches sounding loud in his own ears. He knelt and opened it. Inside, nestled in worn blue velvet, was his guitar. It wasn't a fancy instrument, but it was his. The wood was smooth from years of play, the strings new as of last week, his last small luxury. He lifted it out gently, the weight of it in his hands a familiar comfort. He plugged in the single, small sound hole pickup he had into a tiny battery-powered amplifier, just enough to give the sound a little body in the room, not enough to blast anyone away. He settled on the wooden stool that was there, straightened his back, and settled the guitar on his knee. He took another deep breath, this one deeper, from his belly. This was his ritual. He looked out the window for a second, at the darkening street and the people hurrying by, wrapped in their own worlds. Then he looked down at his hands on the strings. He didn't play a famous rock song or a current pop hit. He played what he felt. His fingers found the strings and began to move. It started soft, a delicate pattern of notes, like water dripping slowly into a quiet pool. It was a little sad, but it was a beautiful kind of sad, full of memory and autumn light. Then he began to sing. His voice wasn't a powerful booming voice. It was clear and warm, and it had a rough edge to it, like stone smoothed by a river. He sang about long roads seen from a bus window, about the way the light looks in an empty room at the end of the day, about missing people you've never really known, and holding onto small hopes. The words were simple, but they felt true. In the shop, the change happened slowly. The software developer in the corner, fingers flying over his keyboard, paused. The gentle melody had woven its way into his concentration. He stopped typing and listened, his head tilting slightly. The student with a massive textbook open, a highlighter in her hand, looked up. The words of the song echoed a loneliness she sometimes felt in the library late at night. She put her highlighter down. Two friends having a low conversation about their week fell silent, one of them resting her chin on her hand, gazing toward the corner. Even the manager, who had gone back to organizing pastries in the glass case, stopped. She stood still, the cloth in her hand forgotten, watching the man in the corner. Her carefully maintained professional distance melted away for a moment. She was just a person, hearing a beautiful, sad song on a cold night. The man played, lost in the music. He forgot about the trade, about the coffee, about being cold or tired or awkward. For 3 minutes, there was just the guitar and the words and the feeling flowing out of him. It was a piece of his story, told in notes and lyrics, offered up honestly to a room of strangers. When the last note faded, a gentle, ringing silence filled the coffee shop. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a full one. The man opened his eyes, blinking, coming back to the room. He looked up, suddenly self-conscious again. Then, from the student, came a slow, deliberate clap. The developer joined in. Then the two friends. Soon, almost everyone in the shop was applauding. Not a wild, cheering applause, but a warm, respectful, genuinely impressed sound. It was the kind of applause that says, "Thank you for that, we heard you." The man's face flushed with a mix of relief and embarrassment. He gave a small, humble nod of his head, a silent "thank you" back to the room. He carefully unplugged his guitar and began to place it back in its case, his hands trembling just a little from the rush of nerves and emotion. He had held up his end of the bargain. He had played his one song. Now, he just needed his coffee, and he would be on his way, his heart a little lighter from the unexpected gift of being heard. But as he fastened the latches on his case, he had no idea that his simple request had already set something in motion. The story wasn't ending here in this warm, fragrant room. It was just beginning. The manager was walking toward him, not with just a paper cup, but with a thoughtful look on her face. And the student, her heart touched by the music, had her phone in her hand, a video already saved and a story already forming in her mind to tell the world. The warm crackle of applause washed over him, making the tips of his ears turn pink. He gave another small, almost shy nod to the room, his focus on carefully placing his guitar back into its velvet nest. His hands were steady now, the trembling gone, replaced by a quiet hum of satisfaction. He'd done it. He'd played his song, and for a few minutes, he hadn't been the guy on the street corner. He'd been a musician in a room full of people who listened. He looked up as the manager walked over. She wasn't holding the simple paper cup he'd expected. Instead, she had one of the shop's big ceramic mugs, the kind they served for people staying in. Steam curled invitingly from the top. She handed it to him with a smile that was different from the polite one she'd given him at the counter. This one reached her eyes. "Black coffee," she said, echoing his request, but her tone was softer. "And I put it in a real mug." It seemed to fit. She paused, glancing around at the customers who were now returning to their drinks and conversations, but with a different, more thoughtful energy in the air. "That was really beautiful, truly. What's the song called?" He cradled the warm mug in both hands, letting the heat seep into his fingers. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little rough. "I just call it miles to go. It's something I've been working on. It's finished," she said simply, and he felt a little burst of pride in his chest. She looked at him for another moment, as if making up her mind about something. "Listen," she began, keeping her voice low. "We have a night, Friday evenings from 7 till 9. It's usually quiet, just some background music. The last person we had playing moved away a month ago. The pay isn't a fortune, but it's something. And you'd get all the coffee you can drink while you're here. Would you be interested?" He just stared at her, the mug halfway to his lips. This wasn't part of the deal. The deal was one song, one coffee. This was a door swinging open, a path appearing where there had just been a wall. A real gig, a regular spot, something to put on a flyer, to tell people about. For a second, he couldn't speak. He just managed a slow nod, then found his voice. "Yes, absolutely, I would really like that. Thank you." "Good," she said, her businesslike demeanor returning, but with a kindness underneath it. "Be here this Friday, same time. Bring your miles to go." She gave him another brief smile and went back behind the counter, leaving him standing there, holding onto the mug like it was an anchor. He took his first sip. It was perfect, hot, strong, and bitter. It tasted better than any coffee he could remember. He moved to one of the now empty armchairs in his corner and sat down, wanting to just be in this warm place for a few more minutes, to let the reality of what just happened sink in. He wasn't alone for long. The student who had been studying earlier approached him. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with a kind, open face. She held her phone a little awkwardly. "Hi," she said. "I'm sorry to bother you. I recorded your song on my phone. I hope that's okay. I didn't ask first, and I can delete it if you want." She looked genuinely worried she'd overstepped. He was surprised. People took videos of everything these days, but he never thought anyone would want a video of him. "No, it's fine," he said. "I don't mind." She looked relieved. It really moved me. The words and the way you played. It felt real, you know? Not like all the super-produced stuff everywhere." She hesitated. "I was thinking of putting it online, on my social media, just with a little caption about what you did, trading a song for a coffee. I think people would love to see it. It might get you some more listeners." He thought about it. The idea of a video of him out in the world was strange and a little scary. But the manager had just offered him a gig. Maybe this student was offering him something, to a chance, however small, to be seen. He had nothing to lose, really. "Okay," he said. "Yeah, you can do that. Thank you." Her face lit up. "Great. I'll make sure to tag the coffee shop, too. Oh, and my name's on the account if you ever want to see it." She told him her username, which he repeated silently to himself to remember. She wished him good luck and went back to her table, already typing excitedly on her phone. A few minutes later, an older man in a comfortable-looking sweater stopped by his chair. He didn't say anything about the music. Instead, he just smiled, nodded, and placed a folded $10 bill on the small table beside him. "For the next coffee," the man said quietly, "and the one after that." Then he was gone, out the door and into the night. The man stared at the money. It wasn't a lot, but it was more than he'd had an hour ago. It was a vote of confidence, a silent gift. He carefully put it in his pocket, feeling the crisp paper against his fingers. He finished his coffee slowly, watching the life of the coffee shop move around him. He didn't feel invisible anymore. The developer guy gave him a thumbs up as he packed his laptop to leave. One of the friends from the earlier conversation smiled at him. He was part of the scenery now, but in a good way. He belonged here, for this little while. Finally, he knew he should go. He had a long walk back to the small, sparse room he was renting by the week, but the walk felt different now. The cold air didn't seem to bite as deeply. He had a full stomach of warm coffee, a $10 bill in his pocket, and a future appointment for Friday night. He had a purpose. He packed up his guitar case, gave a final wave to the manager behind the counter, who waved back and stepped out into the night. The city lights seemed brighter, the noise of the traffic more like a song itself. Meanwhile, back in the coffee shop, the student finished her post. She wrote from the heart, describing the cold evening, the man's simple, brave request, and the stunning beauty of the song that followed. She didn't make it dramatic. She just told the story as it happened. She attached the video, tagged the location of the coffee shop, and posted it with a few hashtags about music and kindness. Then she closed her laptop, packed her books, and left, feeling a little lighter herself. happy to have shared something beautiful. She didn't think much more about it. It was just a nice post on a quiet Tuesday night. She had exams to study for. But the internet has its own way with stories. A friend of hers, a musician in another city, saw the post and shared it. "This is what it's all about," his caption read. A woman who ran a popular blog about everyday magic saw that share and reposted it to her thousands of followers. The video started to move, slowly at first, then picking up speed. People were touched by the simplicity of it, the trade, the unexpected talent, the manager's kind offer. They commented about times they'd been down on their luck, about the power of music, about the need for small acts of connection, hundreds of miles away, in a tidy, quiet living room in a suburban town. An older man was scrolling through his own feed. A friend from his old teaching days had shared the video with a message, "Arthur, this reminded me of David." The phrasing in the chorus, "Listen." The older man, Arthur, clicked play. He saw the young man in the coffee shop corner, heard the first few chords. His breath caught in his throat. He sat up straighter, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. It wasn't just the music, though the guitar work was eerily familiar, a style he'd tried and failed to teach to many students, but had only seen mastered by one person. It was the young man's face, the set of his eyes, the way he held his jaw as he concentrated, the slight curve of his smile when he finished. He played the video again and again. He looked at the young man's hands on the guitar. He listened to the tone of his voice, a raw, uncovered sound his own son had always aimed for. David, his son, David, who had left home so many years ago, pulled away by music and trouble and a restless spirit. They had lost touch. David had fallen off the map. Arthur had never known if his son had settled down, had a family, had a son of his own. He felt a strange, aching pull in his chest. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. The world was a big place, but the resemblance was uncanny. The music was a ghost. He looked at the student's caption, the name of the coffee shop, the city. It was a city David had talked about going to years ago. With hands that weren't quite steady, Arthur found a way to send a private message to the student's account. It was a long shot. She probably got lots of messages, but he had to try. He typed, his words careful and full of a hope he hadn't felt in decades. "Dear young lady," he began, "I saw your video of the musician in the coffee shop. It was wonderful. May I ask, do you know his name? He looks remarkably like someone I lost contact with long ago." He hit send and stared at the screen, waiting for a reply that might never come. The video of the song for a coffee played once more on a loop in the corner of his computer screen, a small beacon of light in his quiet, lonely room. Two lives, separated by years and miles, were now connected by a single thread of music, and neither of them knew it yet. The young man was walking home, thinking only of Friday. The old man was sitting in his chair, thinking of the past, and daring, for the first time in years, to hope for the future. The week between Tuesday and Friday felt different. It wasn't just a stretch of empty days to be filled with busking on windy street corners and counting small change. It was a countdown. For the first time in a long time, the man had a destination. He had a place to be, at a specific time, where someone was expecting him. He practiced more, not just playing his old songs, but thinking about what to play for a whole 2 hours. He wanted to earn that spot behind the microphone in the corner. He spent some of the $10 bill from the kind stranger on new strings, the good kind that held their tune. The rest he saved for a proper meal on Thursday, a hot plate of food that sat in his stomach like a promise of better things. He walked taller. The world, which had felt like a series of closed doors and cold shoulders, had cracked open a window, and a little warm light was streaming in. Friday evening finally came. The autumn chill was back, sharper now, but he felt armored against it. His guitar case felt lighter in his hand, a tool instead of a burden. When he pushed the door open to the coffee shop, the manager looked up from the counter and gave him a genuine, welcoming smile. She pointed to the corner. It was set up. A simple microphone on a stand, a stool, a small amplifier, and a power strip. A space made for him. "Ready?" She called out. "Ready," he said, and he meant it. He sat up, his movements more confident than they had been on Tuesday. The shop was busier tonight. A small group of friends had taken the big table. A couple sat close together on a sofa. The developer from Tuesday was back, this time with a friend. And there, at a small table by the wall, was the student who had taken the video. She grinned and gave him a little wave. He started to play. He began with "Miles to Go," the song that had started it all. People listened. They clapped softly after each song. They didn't stop their conversations entirely, but their voices dropped to a lower, more respectful hum, and they nodded along with the music. It was perfect. He played some other originals, a few quiet covers of songs he loved, letting the music fill the space without trying to dominate it. This was his job now, and he took it seriously. During a short break, the manager brought him a mug of coffee, just like she'd promised. "You're doing great," she said. "They're listening. That's the whole point." He was taking a sip, watching the room, when he saw her. An older woman had come in, not for coffee, it seemed, but looking around with a purposeful, slightly anxious expression. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on him. She hesitated, then walked straight over to him, bypassing the counter completely. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you the musician who was playing here on Tuesday?" He set his mug down, a flicker of nervousness returning. "Yes, that was me." Her face broke into a relieved smile. "I thought so. I saw the video. My daughter showed it to me. One run a little community arts center a few blocks over. We have a small concert series on Sunday afternoons." She pulled a simple business card from her coat pocket and handed it to him. "We can't pay much, but we have a proper sound system and an audience that really comes to listen. I'd love for you to come and play a set. Maybe a month from now, if you're interested." He took the card, the thick paper feeling substantial in his hand. Another offer, another door. He managed to say he was very interested, and they agreed she would email him the details. As she left, he looked at the card, then at the manager who was watching from behind the counter. She gave him a thumbs dash up. The second set felt even better. The news had spread a little. A few people had come in because they'd seen the video online, or heard from a friend about the coffee shop guy. They bought drinks. They stayed to listen, and when he finished his last song just before 9 o'clock, the applause was warm and full. A few people even came up to him afterwards, shaking his hand, asking if he had any music online, telling him which song was their favorite. One of them was a man who worked at a local radio station that played a lot of independent music. He didn't make any promises, but he took down his information. "Send me a recording of that first song," he said. "The one from the video. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll play it for our music director. It has a feel to it." As the crowd thinned out, the manager came over with a white envelope. "For you," she said. It was his pay for the night. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than he'd held at one time in weeks. It was money he'd earned by playing music. He thanked her, his throat tight with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He was packing up his guitar, his mind buzzing with the night's events, the arts center, the radio guy, the applause when the manager approached him again. This time, her expression was more serious, more thoughtful. "There's someone who needs to talk to you," she said, her voice low. He looked at her, confused. "Who?" She got a message, the manager said, nodding towards the student, who was still at her table, looking at her phone with an intense focus. "It's about you. It seems important. Really important." The student looked up and saw them talking about her. She stood and walked over, holding her phone like it was a delicate, precious thing. Her eyes were wide, a mix of excitement and nerves. "I got a message," she said, echoing the manager. "A private message. From an older man. He saw the video. He says you look exactly like his son who was a musician, who he lost touch with years ago." She held out her phone so he could see the screen. He took it, his fingers suddenly cold. He read the message. It was from a man named Arthur. The words were polite, careful, but underneath them was a raw, urgent hope. He looks remarkably like someone I lost contact with long ago. The resemblance, and the music. It's uncanny. My son's name was David. If there is any way you could put me in touch with this young man, I would be forever grateful. The man felt the floor shift under his feet. He read the message again. David. He didn't know anyone named David. He knew nothing about his own father. His mother, who had struggled with her own demons, had rarely spoken of him. She'd called him a traveler, a dreamer, and she had passed away when he was still young, leaving him with a handful of blurry memories and no solid facts. He had been in and out of foster homes, a quiet boy who clung to a cheap guitar someone had left behind. His past was a blank page, a story with no beginning. He looked at the student's face, then at the manager's eye. "I don't know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know who my father was. My mom never really said. The manager put a gentle hand on his arm. Do you want to talk to him? This Arthur? You don't have to. It's your choice. But he seems genuine. He's been trying to find a way to contact you all week. The man looked down at the phone, at the message filled with the lonely, decades-old longing. He thought of his own loneliness, the rootless feeling that had followed him his whole life. He thought of the song he'd played, miles to go, about searching for a place to belong. This could be nothing. It could be a coincidence, a sad old man seeing what he wanted to see. But what if it wasn't? He took a deep, shaky breath. Okay, he said. Okay, can you tell him I'll talk to him? The student's face lit up. Of course. I'll write back right now and give him my number. He can call you through me, if that's okay? To protect your privacy at first. He nodded, numb. The manager guided him to a quiet table in the back and brought him a glass of water. The student tapped away on her phone, sending the message that would connect two worlds. He sat there, waiting, his heart pounding against his ribs. The high of the successful gig was gone, replaced by a deep, trembling uncertainty. He was no longer just a musician who had played for a coffee. He was a man who might be on the verge of learning where he came from. The song was over, but the story it had started was spiraling out in ways he never could have imagined, pulling him toward a past he thought was lost forever, and a connection that could change everything. He sat at the quiet table in the back of the coffee shop, his hands wrapped around the cool glass of water. The sounds of the shop closing up, chairs being placed on tables. The quiet whir of the cleaning machine felt distant, muffled. His mind was somewhere else entirely. The student was nearby, her phone screen glowing in the dim light. She looked up at him. He wrote back, she said, her voice hushed with the importance of it. He's really emotional. He wants to talk. Right now, if that's okay. He gave me his number. Do you want me to call him and hand you the phone? Or you can take the number and call yourself later, when you're ready. The man thought about it. If he took the number and left, he might never call. The fear would grow, the doubt would creep in, and he would convince himself it was a mistake, a fantasy. This had all happened too fast. The safety of not knowing, as painful as it was familiar. But the look on the manager's face, the hopeful energy from the student, and the echo of that lonely, beautiful message pushed him forward. Now, he heard himself say, we can do it now. The student nodded. She tapped the number on her screen and put the phone on speaker, placing it gently on the table between them. The ringing tone was loud in the quiet room. Once, twice, a voice answered on the third ring. It was an older man's voice, thin and a little rough with age, but clear. Hello. Hi, the student said, leaning closer to the phone. This is me, the student from the video. I'm here with the musician. I have you on speaker. There was a long pause on the other end, filled only by the faint sound of the man's breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for this, young man. Can you hear me? Yes, the musician said, his own voice coming out hoarse. He cleared his throat. Yes, I can hear you. My name is Arthur, the old man said. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word was a fragile thing. First, I want to say, the song you played, it was breathtaking, truly. Thank you, the musician replied, the politeness automatic. His heart was hammering. I need to ask you, Arthur continued, the caution evident in his tone. And please, forgive me if this is too personal or if I'm wrong. I have to know, your mother, did she have a love for folk music? For artists like Nick Drake or Joni Mitchell? The question was so specific, so unexpected. It cut through the man's nervous haze. A memory, sharp and clear, surfaced. His mother, in their small apartment, the air smelling of tea and dust. She had an old record player, and she would play one scratched record over and over. A woman's voice, high and lonely, singing about rivers and clouds. Yes, he whispered into the phone. She did. She had one record she played all the time. A woman's voice. Blue asterisk, Arthur breathed out, the word sounding like a prayer. Joni Mitchell's Blue asterisk. It was her favorite. She said it sounded like truth. A shiver, electric and cold, traveled down the musician's spine. No one could know that. No one but him. How do you know that? Arthur's next words came in a rush, as if a dam had broken. Because I gave her that record. For her birthday, the year we met, her name was Elara. Elara with the dark, curly hair and the laugh that sounded like bells. She was a painter. She painted landscapes that were all mood and sky. The musician's vision blurred. He could see her, his mother, The curls always escaping from the band she tied them with, the smudges of paint on her wrists, the way she'd hum along to that record. He'd never known her full name was Alara. To him, she was just Mom. Alara, he repeated, testing the name. It felt strange and beautiful on his tongue. You have her smile, Arthur said. And now he was definitely crying, the tears audible in his wavering voice. I saw it, in the video, when you finished the song. You have her exact smile, and you have my son's hands. Your son? The musician asked, though he was beginning to understand, the pieces falling into a picture that was both wonderful and terrifying. David, Arthur said, the name heavy with love and loss. My boy, David, he was a guitarist, from the moment he could hold one. He was brilliant, but troubled. His mind was a stormy place. He left home when he was 20. He wanted to find his mother, to understand her. He was angry with me for a long time. We had a fight, a terrible one, about his future, about music, about everything. He left, and the letters became fewer, and then they stopped. That was over 25 years ago. I hired people to look, but he just vanished. The musician listened, his own breath shallow. He knew the next question, the one that hung in the air between them. Across all those miles, Arthur asked it, his voice barely a whisper. Young man, what is your name? He realized, with a start, that he had never said his name to either of them. In the video, he was just the musician. To the manager, he was just the guy who played for coffee. He had been so used to being nobody that he'd forgotten to introduce himself. Leo, he said. It was the name his mother had given him. Just Leo. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Leo, Arthur repeated. Short for Leonardo. Yes, Leo said, stunned. How did you? Because that's what Alara wanted to name a son, Arthur interrupted, his voice shaking with a powerful emotion. She told me, one night. She said if we ever had a boy, she wanted to name him Leonardo, after the artist, and call him Leo, for the strength of the lion. David must have known. He must have remembered. The world seemed to tilt. Leo gripped the edge of the table. The student had her hand over her mouth, her eyes shining. The manager stood a few feet away, listening, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I don't have any pictures of him, Leo said, the confession tumbling out. My mom, she had a few old photos, but they were lost over the years. In moves, in bad times. I don't know what he looked like. I do, Arthur said, and now his voice was firmer, filled with a sudden, grandfatherly purpose. I have albums full. I have his old guitar, the one he learned on. Leo, David was my son. And if your mother was Alara, then David was your father. The word landed in the quiet room with the weight of a lifetime. Asterisk father asterisk. It was a word that had meant nothing but absence, a blank space, a question mark. And now, suddenly, it had a name, David. It had a story, a man who played guitar, who had a stormy mind, who went looking for his own mother, a man who, perhaps, had found Alara, a man who had, for a little while at least, been with her, a man who was his father. Leo couldn't speak. A sob, hard and sudden, rose in his chest and escaped as a choked sound. He put his head in his hands. Oh, my boy, Arthur's voice came through, gentle and heartbroken. I am so sorry. This is too much, all at once. I'm so sorry. No, Leo managed to say, lifting his head, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Don't be sorry. I never knew anything. And now, there's so much. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, Arthur said. And Leo could hear the effort he was making to sound calm, to be the steady one. But can I see you? Can we meet? Leo looked around the coffee shop, at the faces of the two women who had, without knowing it, guided him to this moment. This was his place of beginning. It felt right to say yes here. Yes, Leo said. I'd like that. They made a plan. Arthur lived a few hours away by train. They agreed to meet at the coffee shop the very next afternoon. It was neutral ground, safe. The student offered to be there for support, and the manager immediately said the shop was open, and they could have any table they liked for as long as they needed. When the call finally ended, the silence in the coffee shop was profound. Leo felt completely drained, as if every emotion he'd ever held back had been pulled out of him all at once. But underneath the exhaustion was something new, something solid. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was the end of a long, lonely question. The manager walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. You should get some rest, she said softly. You have a big day tomorrow. Leo nodded. He packed up his guitar, his movements slow, The student walked with him to the door. "Thank you," he said to her. "For the video. For everything." She just smiled, her own eyes wet. "It was an honor," she said. He stepped out into the cold night. The city lights were the same. The streets were the same. But he was not. He was Leo. His mother was Alara, a painter who loved Joni Mitchell. His father was David, a guitarist with a stormy mind. His grandfather was Arthur, a man with a voice full of tears and hope, who had albums of photos and an old guitar waiting. He had played a song for a coffee, and in return, he had been given a history, a story, a family. The miles he had to go suddenly had a direction, and for the first time in his life, he was not walking them alone. Tomorrow, he would walk into the coffee shop not as a stranger, but as a grandson meeting his grandfather for the very first time. The thought filled him with a fear and a hope so immense he could hardly hold it all inside. The next morning, the autumn sun was bright but held no warmth. Leo woke up in his small room feeling like he'd lived a whole other life in his sleep. The facts swirled in his head. Arthur, grandfather. David, father. Alara, mother. They were just words the day before. Now, they felt like people, ghosts stepping out of the fog and taking shape. He was nervous in a way he'd never been before. This wasn't stage fright. This was life fright. He took extra care getting ready, choosing his cleanest shirt, smoothing his hair down. He looked at his face in the small, spotted mirror. He was looking for someone else in it now. For this man, David. For this woman, Alara. He saw his own eyes, dark and a little wary, and wondered who they came from. The walk to the coffee shop felt endless. Every step was too fast and too slow at the same time. His guitar case felt heavier than ever, a weight of proof. Who was he without it? Maybe today he would start to find out. When he pushed the door open, the manager was there, and she gave him a smile that was all understanding. "He's not here yet," she said quietly. "Take your time. I've got the corner table in the back reserved for you. It's private." She nodded towards a table tucked away, with two comfortable-looking chairs. It was perfect. He ordered a coffee, not because he needed the trade anymore, but because he needed something to do with his hands. He sat at the table, his back to the wall, facing the door. He took his guitar out of its case, not to play, but just to have it near. It was a part of him, and he felt he might need all the parts of himself today. The minutes ticked by. He watched the door open and close. A group of friends came in, laughing. A man with a bicycle helmet. An older couple. Each time the bell jingled, his heart jumped into his throat. And each time it wasn't him, the thud back into his chest was a little heavier. And then, the door opened again. An old man stood there, slightly stooped, with a head of thick, white hair. He was dressed neatly in a wool coat, and he held a small, old-fashioned suitcase in one hand. He didn't look around for the counter or a menu. His eyes, pale blue and sharp behind his glasses, scanned the room and landed instantly on Leo in the corner. They locked eyes. The old man's face, which had been tight with anxiety, seemed to soften and break apart all at once. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. Leo stood up, his chair scraping softly on the floor. He didn't know what to do with his hands, so he just let them hang at his sides. The old man, Arthur, reached the table. He set the suitcase down carefully. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Leo saw the lines on his face, the kindness and the sorrow in his eyes, and a shape of the nose that looked, vaguely, like his own. Arthur's lips trembled. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He tried again. "Leo?" he whispered. Hearing his name from this stranger who was not a stranger did something to Leo. All the walls he'd built, all the toughness he'd learned from a life on his own, just crumbled. He nodded, a quick, jerky motion. "Yes." And then Arthur did something Leo didn't expect. The old man didn't try to hug him. Instead, he reached out with a shaky hand and very gently, almost reverently, touched the side of Leo's guitar, which was leaning against the table. It was a musician's greeting, an acknowledgement of the thing that had brought them here. He had one just like it, Arthur said, his voice thick, his first real one, a little less worn than this, but the same model. Arthur then bent down and opened the suitcase on the floor. He pulled out a large, leather-bound photo album, its cover cracked with age. He placed it on the table between them. With great care, he opened it. The first page held a black and white photograph of a young woman. She had a wild cloud of dark curls and was laughing, her head thrown back, holding a paintbrush like a wand. "Alara," Arthur said, his finger tracing the edge of the photo. "Your grandmother, she was." Sunlight, Leo stared. He knew that laugh. He had seen it a long time ago. He had made his mother laugh like that, sometimes, when he was very small. A weight in his chest he hadn't known was there began to loosen. Arthur turned the page. There were more pictures of her, painting by a window, smiling with a young Arthur, his hair dark and full. Then, a picture of her holding a baby, looking tired but radiant. "Your father," Arthur said. "David." He turned more pages. A little boy with a gap-toothed grin, holding a toy guitar. A teenager with long hair, looking moody and beautiful, cradling a real guitar with fierce pride. A young man in his 20s, his eyes intense and full of a fire that looked like it could either create or burn. Leo saw himself in stages. The shape of the teenage boy's eyebrows, the way the young man held his shoulders. It was undeniable. He was so talented, Arthur said, his voice full of a father's awe and a father's pain. But the music in his head was so loud it sometimes drowned out everything else. "We fought. I wanted safety for him. He wanted truth. He left to find it. I think he found Alara. I think he found your mother. And I think," Arthur's voice broke, "I think he gave you the best parts of himself. The music, the search for truth. And he gave you her name." Arthur reached into the suitcase one more time. He lifted out a guitar. It was an old acoustic, simple and beautiful. This was his, Arthur said, offering it to Leo, the one he learned on. "I've kept it all these years. I'd like you to have it." Leo was crying now. He hadn't even felt the tears start. They were just there, hot on his cheeks. He took the guitar. It felt different in his hands, lighter and heavier at the same time. It was history. It was an inheritance. He strummed one soft chord. The sound was warm and full, a well-loved sound. "Can you?" Arthur began, then swallowed. "Would you play something?" "On his guitar?" Leo nodded. He didn't think about what to play. He just played the beginning of Miles to Go, the song that had started it all, the song about long roads and searching. But on this guitar, in this moment, it didn't sound sad anymore. It sounded like a journey that had finally found its way home. When he finished, Arthur was weeping openly, silently, the tears running down the grooves of his face. He reached across the table then, and took Leo's hand in both of his. His hands were old and papery, but their grip was strong. "I have spent 25 years wondering," Arthur said, his voice raw, "wondering if he was safe, if he was happy, if he was alive. And all along, he had left a piece of himself behind. He had left you. I lost my son, but I found my grandson." Leo held onto his grandfather's hands. He looked from the old man's tear-filled eyes to the smiling face of Alara in the album, to the defiant eyes of David, his father. The empty spaces inside him weren't gone, but they were being filled with pictures and stories, and love that had been waiting for him all along. "I don't know what happens now," Leo said honestly. "Now," Arthur said, smiling through his tears, "you come and visit. You tell me about your life. I'll tell you about theirs. We have time. We have all the time in the world now." The manager brought them to fresh cups of coffee, her own eyes red-rimmed. She didn't say a word, just gave Leo's shoulder a squeeze as she set them down. They sat there for hours, in that corner of the coffee shop. Arthur told stories, silly ones about David as a boy, difficult ones about his struggles, beautiful ones about Alara. Leo talked about his mother, the few good memories he had, and about his own long, lonely road. They were not just filling in blanks. They were building a bridge between two lives, between the past and the present, over a chasm of years. When they finally stood to leave, the afternoon light was long and golden. Arthur picked up his empty suitcase. Leo carried two guitars, his own in the case, and his father's, carefully, in his hands. They walked out together into the cool evening. The same street, the same city, but nothing was the same. Leo was not just a musician. He was a grandson. He was a legacy. He had played his song for a coffee, and in return, he had been given a family, a history, and a second guitar to carry forward into all the miles he still had to go. And for the first time, he knew he wouldn't be walking those miles alone.